last month or the previous month. All of those things that we're trying to do there are in an effort to actually help the business owner make more informed business decisions. So if we're in the accounting space, I would argue we should be meeting with our clients on a monthly or quarterly basis to dive deep into the financial reports that the bookkeepers may have provided. Now, that is a discussion. If I'm a business owner and I think I'm paying for accounting services, but all I'm receiving are the financial reports, dare I say I'm either not getting what I'm paying for or I've misunderstood what I was offered.
Yeah, that was a challenge that I had where we were doing really high quality bookkeeping work, and the tax preparers who we would send that off to were very happy, but we didn't have a lot of interaction with the client once we got things set up and running. And sometimes often they would forget about all the things that we were doing, and they'd just see our monthly fee every single month, right? And some would eventually say, well, what am I really getting? And cancel.
Yeah.
So maybe
they didn't
having
see
more
the
of
value
those,
in it.
right? So the points of contact, the regular monthly, quarterly meetings, that is how you make sure that you stay top of mind.
Yeah. And I think from a bookkeeping point of view, I think it's very important for the business owner to understand that if they're paying for the reports to be provided but not analyzed, then that's what I'm paying for. And I shouldn't expect that they're going to interpret that data for me. But if I am hearing the accountant say they're providing accounting services and I'm paying for accounting services, I dare say that the business owner should expect that analysis and that regular meeting or interval with the client so that I can explain what the numbers are saying. I truly believe as an accounting professional, we should see ourselves as translators or interpreters of that information that's coming from the language of accounting.
So what's the breakdown of these services across the firms that you work with? I feel like tax planning, tax prep, that's going to be, most people are doing that. Most firms are doing that these days, right? What about like the bookkeeping and accounting and the CFO and advisory services? Like, do you have an rough idea of where we're at as a profession?
Well, before I answer your question, I'm going to go push back a little bit. Most of the people that I talk to don't do tax planning and preparation. Most just do tax preparation. There are a number of firms that exclusively do tax planning and they don't do the preparation. So there is a distinction between those two services. I know at least I overheard in a previous conversation that you had online that you're not a fan of cost segregation. So that's tax planning. You've got ERC that might be something that you could roll into the mix. It's a seasonal thing right now. You've got, let's say, cost conservation easements, the cost segregations that I mentioned. You've got R&D tax credits. There's various strategies that can be implemented that a tax preparer may not be actually doing with their clients and helping them deploy before the year end. So there is a distinction, I feel, between tax planning and tax preparation. And there's some wonderful services out there that people subscribe to find various strategies they can take to their clients. And in doing so, get paid very, very well for the planning services they're providing, not the preparation services. But to your question as to how many firms offer these, it varies. Honestly, I've got people that do only bookkeeping. I've got people that only do tax preparation. I've got people that do, say, accounting and tax preparation, but don't do bookkeeping or tax planning. It just varies. It's hard to say who's doing what. The larger the firms, what you generally find is that as the firm gets larger, they'll bring in-house individuals that specialize in different areas. And so they'll have on staff an accountant that actually works with the client from an accounting perspective, while at the same time in the firm, they'll have a person that is the tax specialist that actually brings to the client the tax planning strategies, and the firm will do the tax preparation. And so as you get larger, you'll actually find that they'll bring in the staff needed to provide these various services. But admittedly, over the years, I've found that more and more are starting to move into that fractional or part-time CFO space or even advisor space.
Yeah, that's what we are told, it seems, by the profession, by the leaders in our profession, by AICPA and the state societies is, we all need to become advisors because all of the bookkeeping and tax prep is getting automated by technology.
That has been the narrative for years, yes.
Right, but it hasn't gone away, and so I'm curious, how do you see technology and automation and all these changes happening with AI impacting these core services that we have outlined, like here? How is that changing the mix?
It's revolutionizing it. Let me just give you some context. Back in the 70s, I think there was a fear for calculators. There was a worry whether or not somebody would have a calculator on their wrist as they went in to take an exam as a watch phone or as a watch. You've got in the 90s, the softwares coming on the scenes, the various accounting softwares, and they thought that would be the demise of the accounting profession. We're all still here. We're all still doing the work. We're still vital to the success of business. What it is the tools we're using, if we embrace them, become very essential to our success, and they can help us become more efficient, which then causes us to make more money and be more profitable. So that's all. These are all game changers in a positive way, in my opinion. So as it comes to the AI, the various tools that we're finding, I think we're watching an evolution. And I know on your show, you've been addressing a lot of these as AI has been integrated into various platforms, Canopy and so forth. They're integrating this as a tool within their interface. That's powerful and it's wonderful. But there's something that I think you might have an opinion on. And it's first, as we integrate these tools, we have to understand that the tool is only useful if we ask the right prompts. If we're not asking the right questions, the tool is useless. It doesn't just start asking questions on its own. We have to initiate that discussion. But as accounting professionals, as these tools get integrated into the various software interfaces and tools we use, they're going to leverage that technology and help us in those interfaces now use that information or those reports and so forth for our clients. But here's the third thing, and this is where I think that it's going to pause the integration or the impact to us as an accounting profession, and it's the accountability that we bring to our client interactions. You can have let's say an AI within a software, let's say QuickBooks for the lack of a better example, go through and analyze the financials and from that produce an executive summary and actionable items. And that's all great. But when you think of it at the end of the day, it's no different than our alarms going off and hitting the snooze button. What we need is that accountability that an advisor role can actually bring to the client relationship. And if the business owner has an accounting professional with whom they're interacting, and through the prompts and the tools we're having, we're providing this resourceful information, that's great. But it's then the advisor role where we then ask the business owner how important this is to implement, what timeline would they like to actually deploy this, and then hold them accountable. Did they do what they felt was needed within the business? And that accountability is that advisor element that the AI isn't going to bring. It'll tell you what to do, but it's not going to make you do it. It's not going to hold you accountable.
Mm-hmm. One of the impacts of technology on the work that we do is that it shortens the time it takes to do it.
Yes.
It makes us more productive. How does that fit into an hourly billing model?
It doesn't. You need to move away from it. I speak of 5 traditional pricing models that accounting professionals use. Hourly is the first and most common, but I think it needs to be only used in project work and back work, which is to say, we don't know how long the project may last, or we're just doing tasks like training staff. I'm going to come in and work with the firm or come into your office and train. Well, those are tasks that are going to be performed at an hourly level. All the other functions need to be priced differently: flat rate, menu pricing, revenue pricing, or value pricing.
Mm-hmm. We had a question come in from Michelle. Wouldn't this level of detail be itemized in the engagement letter? And I think that was regarding the original outline of the 3, really 6 services with 3 categories.
Yes.
And I feel like, well, I'll let you answer that question, Roger, but I feel like this is related to what we were just talking about with hourly billing, with scope of services. Like a lot of CPAs that I know don't really break down what they do into categories or into services. It's just, here's an engagement letter. I'm going to do what you need, and I'll bill you on an hourly basis. So I think if you're coming from that perspective, this seems kind of strange to think about it this way. Could you speak to that?
Certainly. So first of all, from a engagement lever point of view, I think we need to manage expectations, and in setting those with the client, they should understand what the relationship should look like. I'm just going to be providing for you the reports, therefore I'm providing bookkeeping services. And if I was doing menu pricing, this would be a great example. If you're just looking for the financial reports on a monthly basis, I'll provide those. You'll have them by the 15th of the next month, and they're in your hands. They're accurate, complete. You use them as you see fit. If, however, you'd like to pay me a little bit more for this flat rate or a package deal, I'll actually then do the analysis of your financials, and I'll give you information, actionable information, things that you need to be aware of, how your cost of goods is impacting your gross profit, whether or not inflation's impacted you and you need to do a price increase. I'll give you that information so you can actually see what's going on in the business as you're experiencing it day to day now through the accounting information. Well, that's for an additional service and a cost. And at that point, I'm articulating in the engagement letter which package or service you're choosing. So I do feel, and your comment earlier with this question, I think goes back to my very first premise. I think as a profession, we're doing a poor job of explaining what we do and what we can have our clients expect of the services we're providing. And in turn, they need to understand more clearly what they're paying for. And I think this communication is what needs to be improved. So to the hourly question, I think anyone that's remaining on an hourly, as these additional tools come out that streamline our efficiency, all you're doing is you're hurting yourself. What used to take you 10 hours now takes you 7. Now you're billing not 10, you're billing 7. Your motivation to adopt or incorporate these technologies, this idea of I'm now more efficient, is hurting me, and I'm less inclined to adopt these technologies. I'm standoffish, I'm old school. I mean, there's a lot of negative connotations that I would say come from the hourly mentality, and it has its place, but is again in that project or task type situations.
Yeah, I feel like hourly has gone away in a lot of cases when it comes to bookkeeping services. And it had to, because we became so much more efficient when we all moved to cloud-based accounting systems.
Yeah.
I experienced this myself. If I had kept billing hourly, I would have lost 80% of my revenue. But in tax and in audit, the core services of many firms, most firms, I would say 90% of the business tends to be that one or the other. We really haven't seen big increases in productivity with the move to cloud. If anything, it's created more of a hassle in many cases versus having the paper, which used to be just easier. But with AI coming on the scene, that could change really quickly.
Oh yeah.
Like tax research, for instance, right? That's really a fairly tedious process. I mean, we don't have to go to the library anymore to do it. We have to log into specialized research solutions, right? I think BNA is one of those. But imagine in not very long when you can ask an AI that's plugged into these databases to do the research for you. And I was talking with Ashley Francis, who's a CPA who specializes in estate planning and this tax planning for wealthy individuals, and she said it could take 40 hours to do the research on a really complicated issue, but that could go down to 4 hours now. So if you're billing hourly for that, what are you going to do? Right? We have to figure out how to package what we were doing into services that are more like products than what we were doing just billing hourly, or we're going to be out of business.
Yeah, if you're, and I would trust you're very familiar with this, in the tax world, you've got a lot of people that are moving towards tax resolution services. There's good money to be made there. Tax planning services. There's some software programs and so forth that are intent on providing kind of here's a strategy, a process that you should consider with your client. And as these simplify our ability as accounting professionals to go to our clients and help them implement things in their business to legally and correctly realize some tax savings, there's huge numbers there, and the value of that savings can be passed on to the tax preparer who knew and studied and through their expertise was able to provide that strategy. So there's a lot to be said about the tax planning side of this whole business model.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is that part of our ethics training and professional rules and guidelines, it says that we're not supposed to charge a percentage of the tax savings that we generate. Like,
Mm-hmm.
do you get that objection from people you work with, firms you work with?
Oh yeah, I think there's that conscientious thing there. But if you hear what's going on in the tax planning space, what they're doing is they're not looking necessarily at the savings. They're just looking at the value of it, and they're ballparking maybe what the savings will be, and they're taking some percent of that. But yeah, I understand your point, and that is a question that I think every firm needs to ask for themselves based on pricing. But it nonetheless is a strategy going on out there.
Yeah. It's funny though, we're really just doing a workaround when we do that, right? We're projecting what we think the savings will be. We're not charging based on the savings.
Yes.
But essentially we're doing it without doing it.
Yeah,
And
you're moving into the grayer area of I don't know what your return actually is and what the savings will actually be, but I know it's going to be in the tens or hundreds or whatever, and therefore my fee is going to be $50,000.
Right. But it's funny that like our professional organizations discourage that, but really that is the essence of value, right? If
Yes.
I can't charge based on my inputs anymore, on my time that I'm putting into this, how else do I charge the value of what I'm doing?
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
that I think is the crux of it. And you and I both know for years at the numerous accounting conferences, we would hear from the stage that the accounting is becoming commoditized and we need to find ways to be offering more value. And that's where the statement would end. What does more value mean? How am I providing that? And how do I price that value? And then you have this whole discussion about value pricing. Well, this has been in the industry for 5, 10 years. And yet the exactness of the science, how to identify what is of value to the client that I can provide that they're willing to pay for, and how do I price that, has been elusive. That's been something I've been dealing with for the last 5 years and addressing. And it's because of my ability to address that I'm so confident and bold in being able to say that this is, I feel, the direction we need to go. And when AI came on the scene, obviously it's helping us do our jobs better, but it's simplifying the time that it's needed. Therefore, we have to value again our work so that we don't charge less because it took us less time to prepare it.
Yeah. And even though it's taken us less time, we might have to bring our fee down from what we used to do on an hourly basis, but that's a good thing, in my opinion, because it allows us to serve a lot more customers than we could before, clients, customers, whatever you want to call them. And our margin still stays good. It's almost like we're splitting the value with the customer, right? We're doing
Yeah.
less work, our margins are up, and the customer ends up paying less. Everybody wins, right? That's the promise of technology.
Yeah, and I'm going to simplify it even further. I think the essence of this goes back to one, we know what questions to ask. We have the experience and the know-how to accelerate this process. Therefore, we're the experts, and we're being paid for that expertise. It's not the time that it's taking us to do these things. It's the experience and expertise we have through the skills we've developed. But the second part of this is, and I think you have a lot to say about this, is there's talk for the last number of years about the individuals entering the accounting profession being fewer than the people that are retiring from the profession. And we have a demand for accounting services here that needs to be met. And how better to do that than to simplify our ability to provide that service? If we can now serve more clients because we're more efficient with our time, it's a win-win for the economy.
Yeah. And that's what I'm seeing with the firms I talk to that are really thriving, is they are actually doing less in terms of scope. They are scoping down all the services they offer, and sometimes being really, really specific about what kind of clients they take on.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe it's just e-commerce businesses between $1 and $10 million in revenue, and specifically helping them with their sales tax issues. Like, that's very specific.
Oh, yeah. Even to the point
as,
they're saying, I only work with companies that are doing Etsy. I mean, they'll niche down that small.
Yes, yes. I talked to a gentleman who specializes in Keller Williams real estate agents. That's it.
That's
Right? They
it.
have a standard chart of accounts, and he just does it for that business.
Mm-hmm.
And has automated all of the journal entries from the statements they receive from the company. Right?
Beautiful.
That's the sort of like hyper specific type of firm that will grow rapidly. And I guess the reason that's possible is because we aren't limited by geography anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
I can go get clients anywhere in the country or the world. And so, I may have had to serve everybody in my local city in the past, but now I can pick and choose my clients.
That, and I really think that with technology, we're not only going to be able to target them, market them, service them, but offer a better quality service because it's specific to their needs, talking to them in their language. And because of the niching, we're going to be very confident in our strategies and approaches we can take to them to help them in their businesses. I mean, it's a win-win.
So, and it's something nice to think about. Like, if you can get to that point, that's great. But there's a lot of folks who are listening now who are probably in that more traditional firm where they're just doing everything for everyone, billing hourly. And, it's stressful, right? When you're having to constantly learn how to do new things. And you can't process size anything, if that's a word, right? Because you're always doing different stuff. Do you have any strategies or advice? I'm sure you probably spend hours and hours working on this with firms, like, but what can you tell us in the time we have that will help us get going into this, productized services, like, with books and accounting, tax planning, tax prep, CFO advisory?
So I'm going to answer your question from 2 points of view. First, the owner. I do feel that as the owner, they need to look at, are they willing to embrace these technologies and implement standard operating procedures within their company to systematize the processes going on to ensure that the quality of work for their clients is consistent? If they're doing that, they're going to go through a process of, I think, improving what their deliverables are, and they're going to become much more confident in what they're providing to their clients. And so you're going to be able to market it easier, sell it better, provide it better. So from the owner's point of view, I think you need to be welcoming to technology and really explore what has changed with regards to virtual services. You can do the work remotely now. There's a lot of things that the owner needs to take in consideration, especially with employees, that they can be remote as well. Let's answer the question from, like you just said, that employee that's the bookkeeper that's in the office, that's having to do a variety of things for different companies. The first thing I would suggest is they need to be, if you're not seeing it as a job, but rather a career, you need to be open to technology. And as different platforms start to integrate this AI technology and so forth, you need to embrace it and find time to, perhaps even on your own time, if the company isn't providing you this ability, go out and learn these new skills. Find ways to learn and acquire the skills you need to become an expert in those different platforms so that you become much more valuable to the client, or not the client, but the employer. And if you're in that position, you're going to have, I think, job security is what you're perhaps looking for at that level. And more importantly, if that client, or excuse me, that employer doesn't see the value in what it is you're doing, you're going to have the ability to move elsewhere and go somewhere where you're much more appreciated, simply because you've chosen to embrace the technology. You cannot avoid that today. What's happening right now is akin, if not more significant, than the cloud software applications that came on the scene, say, 20 years ago.
It's incredible what's happened in just a few months. I
Yes.
mean, ChatGPT came out late last year, and version 4 broke onto the scene in what, March, April,
Mhm.
and has now passed the CPA exam
Yeah.
and is doing, it's not quite doing accounting tasks yet, but as soon as that is plugged into Excel, which Microsoft is going to do in the
Mhm.
next few months, we're just going to be able to chat with Excel and ask
Yeah.
it to do things like an intern would, right? Here, please, here's all this unstructured data. Please organize it for me.
But I'd really like to hit home, based on what you just said there, a very important point. One, I don't feel we have to be at that ChatGPT interface level. That's like coding or writing DOS. I mean, you don't need to worry about that. I really believe that the various softwares that we all use in our firms, most, if not all of them, are going to find some way to integrate them, just like you said, with Microsoft putting it in Excel. So now in my email browser, in my Canopy interface, in my HubSpot interface, whatever, I'm going to find this part in here that's going to help me write social media. It's going to help me write emails. It's going to help me write reports. But the point is it's going to come down to our ability as individuals to ask the right questions. That's the prompts. And that's where I think we really need to develop our skill sets so that we're asking the right questions for the AI to do its job properly.
Mm-hmm. And we actually saw Financial Sense, the sponsor of this series, has implemented an integration with GPT now, where you can ask it to create a checklist, say for a bookkeeping monthly close for a particular type of client, let's say
Yeah.
construction, and it will go and create that entire checklist.
Yeah.
And
And I
gives you a
heard you
starting
talk about
point.
that in your podcast. So yes, I know
Yeah.
exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. And that's just the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that is a good question, is like, do you spend a bunch of time going and playing around with these tools that are not yet integrated, or do you just wait for them to get integrated? And I think the answer is, given how busy we are, I would still recommend that people go and they play with ChatGPT just because it's so cool. And
Just for fun. Yeah.
yeah, you want to learn how prompt writing works and
Mm-hmm.
experience just how intelligent it really is. But very soon, like by the end of this year, we're going to start seeing this stuff. So we had another question come in. Oh, Michelle asked if we could state the 6 levels again. So we've got bookkeeping and accounting.
Mm-hmm.
That's category 1. Then we've
Yep.
got to tax planning and tax prep. Maybe we reverse the order, I suppose. And then we've got 3 CFO and advisory services. So those are like the 3 buckets. And you could probably put everything that we do as professionals under one of those 3.
Yes, 100%.
Which would be a lot better than what I see on most accounting firm websites, where you click on services on the main menu and you get a drop down with 20 different categories.
Oh yeah. No, this is, because you want to throw into bookkeeping, are they doing payroll? And, sometimes we want to just fixate on the different tasks we perform. I do accounts reconciliation. I think we need to get beyond that. Those are all features related. What we're talking about is what the client's going to get, and it's the benefits. But the thing that I point out, you commented about tax planning and preparation perhaps being flipped. It does flow a little bit better from the tongue to say tax planning and preparation, but it's also the sequence. You have to do the planning before the year end to determine what the tax liability is, to do the tax preparation, to do the filing. So that's
how it should be done, right? That's how it should be done.
Yeah, that's the idea behind it.
Yep. Well, and that's why, getting folks on a productized service offering when it comes to tax, and getting them on a recurring billing fixed fee type of engagement is so valuable, because you can get your customers or your clients paying you year round on a monthly or a quarterly or a biannual cadence, whatever you prefer. And they're paying you in advance for the tax return, but they're really not paying you for the return anymore. They're paying you for the planning, and the return is just a consequence of all of that.
Yeah.
Right?
Let me give you just a real simple application of this. So in the first quarter, you're actually meeting with the client to receive from them the various reports and such to file the return. Great. Wonderful. You file the return. In the process of filing the return, typically you'll find some returns that missed out on opportunities last year because they failed to do something that could have saved them money. Well, you're going to flag those. And those are the people you're going to meet with in the second quarter. You're going to pull them in and say, hey, by the way, in filing your return, I noticed a few things that you didn't do last year that you ought to consider doing this year because it would have saved you some money. Well, that's a great conversation to be having. You don't have it in the first quarter because you're busy with tax season, but second quarter is very appropriate. Third quarter, you want to meet with the client and address, here are some things based on the current tax law, the codes, that you ought to consider implementing in your business based on your industry and so forth, that will actually help you save money. So this is anybody and everybody that you're providing tax planning services to. In the fourth quarter, you're going to have 2 conversations. It's in the same discussion though. The first conversation is, did you do the things we talked about in the third quarter that would save you money before the year end here? It's coming quickly. Did you get those things in place so that we can legally use them when we file? But the second question is, hey, by the way, tell me about your business model. Is there anything going on right now that rather than first quarter next year, for example, we ought to maybe accelerate and do this year because it would help us with the tax season? And all of a sudden, you've had 3 very constructive conversations with the client that are tax planning oriented, not tax preparation. And that leads you into the tax preparation season. You go in, you've got a client that's actually done some of the things. You can clearly show the savings that you were able to offer, and you file the return.
So you're doing quarterly meetings.
Yes.
I love that, because you've got this regular cadence. You're with the client every quarter, so you can naturally bill on a quarterly basis, right? The billing lines up with the meeting. And I don't know, do you recommend this? I've actually advised folks to in the engagement letter specify that this quarterly recurring payment includes your tax return, but if you cancel, right, if you unsubscribe from the firm, we're not going to do your tax return after you're not a customer anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah,
So
I've heard of that.
Unlink the payment from the return. It's not about the return anymore, the filing of the return. And that's, I think psychologically, that's a little difficult, because that's what we've always charged for.
Yeah. You can change the wording, but I like what you're saying. Essentially, what you're trying to say is, I'm taking the return that you're going to file next year, and I'm going to amortize the cost of that and have you pay it over the course of this year. You're prepaying for the return, so I don't have to ask you for a lump sum next year. And there might be some numbers that get offset, but I'm theoretically going to charge you this amount. Thus, I'm going to have this relationship over the course of the year with tax planning. Come tax return time, I file the return, and theoretically, you've already paid for it. So that's the simplistic version of that. But obviously, the return could have some variations that may cost a little bit more. Maybe there's an adjustment that next year that will then increase the fee for the following year. But the beauty of it is just like you said, you've coupled the service to where they don't want to go anywhere else. They've kind of paid for it already. And if they leave, they're going to forego the funds that they've paid towards that next return.
Exactly. And you don't have any accounts receivable. Like how
Yes.
much money do firms have tied up in accounts receivable? It's crazy.
Mhm. Yep. I love this discussion. This is
Right?
great.
Yeah, and it allows you to have capacity, so you can take the money that you're earning over the course of the year, and it's spread out. There's no longer this feast and famine sort of approach, and you can properly staff to actually be available and
Mhm.
to respond to client requests.
And for a
And
lot of the people I work with, it allows them to get more into the creative space of accounting. They do more accounting work rather than the bookkeeping, recording the transactions. They get more into the planning versus the preparation. They have staff do the bookkeeping. They have staff do the tax preparation. They're in the creative space. And then that lends them the ability to move into that CFO and advisory space more easily because they've now hired individuals to take care of the day-to-day bookkeeping, tax prep type functions.
that's exactly where I was going to go next with this, which is the challenge of actually adding CFO and advisory services, which in my experience is no time, no time to
Yeah.
do it. But by pushing that tax prep, that bookkeeping work to staff, doing it in advance and not after the fact. Um, I mean, we're not doing it in advance. You can't do bookkeeping work before the transactions have occurred, but we're doing it every month or every week instead of at the end of the year.
Mhm.
We get ahead of it, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, then we actually have time to breathe, which is nice.
Yeah, I think the thing that a lot of the business owners that are hearing this will appreciate is the thing that causes this transition that allows them to move into this space is standard operating procedures. It's becoming efficient with the workflows that exist in the business and standardizing those to the point that you can hire individuals that can do those. And now you're no longer involved in the day-to-day work that's going on in the business for your clients, and it gives you that space to go into the creative and the more valued and more profitable margins on the accounting, the tax planning, and the CFO and advisory services.
Standardizing processes, documenting them, creating checklists was the single most important thing I did as a firm owner because it allowed me to hand off the work, right? And that's why it blows my mind that so many firms don't have practice management software still.
Mhm.
I mean, they're using Excel to maybe manage a list of clients and a list of returns, maybe some bookkeeping work. They've got columns for different areas of the close. But like there's so much more that goes into it.
Mhm.
There's so much documentation and if you don't do that, if you don't get your staff documenting processes and doing them in a systematic way, you have no hope of scaling that type of business.
You said the magic word, it's scaling. It's taking what you're so good at and documenting it to the point that you can duplicate it and ultimately at the end delegate it. That's what we're trying to do here. And once you get those processes in place, it doesn't necessarily matter who's doing it. So as somebody may leave the company, you still have the process in place to ensure the work's done for the client. And maternity leaves, vacations, employees leave and go elsewhere or grow. You grow to the point that you need to hire someone else and they need to come in
Yeah.
and just follow the steps that you have in place. It ensures consistency of quality of work as well. So there's a lot of value that comes from this. And I'm going to add one other element. When you're building a business, it's not just the book of business that has value. When you're building a business, it is the culture you have with the staff that you've employed and the systems that you're using to get the work done. And if you have those three elements in place, you've built a business that isn't you. You've built a business that I refer to as a self-sustaining, living, breathing entity that has value that you can now sell on the market because you're not involved in the day-to-day operations of the business any longer.
It's important to do even as a freelancer, even if you're solo, it's
Mhm.
important to write these processes down so that, you can bring somebody in when you need a break, right?
Oh
Even if it's
yeah.
just one person. I finally took 2 weeks off I think I was telling you before we started, I went to Italy for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I'm 39. It's the first time I've ever taken 2 weeks off in my entire professional career.
Wow.
Right. And I feel like a lot of accountants are in the same boat because we always feel like if we take 2 weeks off, we're just going to have 2 weeks more work to catch up on when we get back.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, if you're listening and you're in that boat with me, The only thing that allowed me to do that was I spent the last 2 years in my new business documenting everything I did and building processes, and that's what let me do it. And so I make podcast episodes now. My team made the episodes. I didn't review them. I have people to review them. They just went out the door. Right? Like
Mhm.
it's doable, but it does take a lot of upfront investment.
Yes,
Yeah,
but it pays off. It's worth it.
it pays off, right? Because now I actually got to take a real vacation. Uh, we have some more questions that have come in. I want to make sure we get to those before we run out of time here.
Certainly.
Candy asked, "What software do you recommend for advisory dashboards?"
Well, there's a mix of answers to that. I'm not going to endorse any particular one right now. What I'm going to say is this: from a dashboarding point of view, you just want to be aware of what the KPIs that the client is looking for. I oftentimes find that some of the businesses have their own software interfaces that they're currently utilizing. They just don't leverage them. They have them, but they don't really know how to identify what KPIs they need to be following or watching. And so rather than me imposing upon the client what they ought to be using, I find that today a lot of the industries have ones that they're able to utilize themselves. Internally, there are things that we can consider and use. I don't have a preference. I'm going to be pretty agnostic. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would say like it's funny because I previously worked at a company where we really heavily promoted dashboards, and that was like a big part of our software. The number of clients that actually look at the dashboard is very low. What they really want is the meeting with you so they can ask their very specific questions that the dashboard doesn't answer.
Yep.
So,
Yeah. I've
yeah.
found dashboards to be very helpful with the clients I work with. The thing that I've experienced is I used to go in suggesting they use a certain interface or platform, and I found that now today in most of the industries I work with, the franchise people, they have their own dashboards. The problem is the client, just like you said, they don't know what they're looking at or what they should be watching. And a lot of these software programs, they try to help out the business owner, but if we can come in and help them with that, that makes a difference. There's two keys I will add to this, though. The dashboard, it does need to be visible. And so I'm a very big proponent of making it in some common space visible for the employees to see. There's a sense of accountability that goes on there because everybody can see what everyone else is supposed to be doing. So there's a big point with that. The second thing I'd point out is just what you said. The dashboard isn't the key. It's the accountability that comes from the numbers that are being shown there. And that's where I feel we come in, because we're able to talk about what's on the screen in the KPIs that we're tracking. And all of a sudden now the conversation's happening. And that's what's going to move the needle. The dashboard doesn't necessarily move the needle.
Yeah, the one thing that I've seen um, done that seems successful or seems to work is in the email that goes out to the client with the monthly financials, highlight the 5 key indicators. Like just keep it really short, right? You don't need this big dashboard with dozens and dozens of indicators. That's just overly confusing. Just give them the 5 things that really matter for that business, and that can just
The
be in
way
bullet point form, right?
Yeah, the way we teach it is we teach that every person, every department, and the company need to have one key metric, one. And with that key metric, if they did that one thing, we would assume that everything will fall into place for the financials to be positive at the end of the year, that we'll meet budget and forecast and all that. The one key metric has with it 3 to 5 supporting metrics. So if that one metric is not being achieved, we will go deeper and look at the 3 to 5 that we've associated with it to say, okay, if these aren't in place, that first won't be achieved. But if that's not being done, something's amiss down here, and we're going to go deeper. But I only go deeper if the one's amiss. If it's on or above standard, I move on to the next one. So you're right. Key metrics. So the manager looks at the employees look at their own, the owner looks at the department or the managers. You're looking at very few. You're getting down to, like you were just describing, 3 to 5 that you're just going to watch and only go deeper when one's kind of throwing up that red flag.
And this is a great way to get started in CFO advisory, is just defining these metrics with your client and reporting on them every month, or every however often it is, right? And they may not be financial. That's the other thing that's
Yes.
important.
Yes.
Like often they're operational. Like you're not going to look at a marketing person and say, I'm looking at you based on your spend. No, it's about what did you achieve with that spend. It's how many leads did you generate, right?
That's right.
Or how many closed won deals if it's the salespeople, right?
Yep.
So
Yeah, these are metrics that are outside of the financial reporting. And so that's important, very important to realize is that when you leave the accounting space and move into the CFO and advisory, you're going to go deeper into the business model and you're going to be looking at other metrics that are part of their success. And I would add, as part of the CFO component, yes, there's a lot of key KPIs you're looking at, but I would dare say that you're getting into cash flow management. You're really involved with accounts payable and receivables policies. How does the company have policies regarding money management? You're looking at capital. You're looking at the relationships with vendors. You're looking at the relationships with investors. You're at the CFO level dealing with a lot of kind of operational decision making that's going on with the company as to how money flows within and without the company. So CFO is fun. I like CFO. It's very creative.
We got another question. Would you suggest that if a firm is expanding to add these services, that all parties need to know all aspects or just their niche, i.e. CFO, tax, etc.?
I would rather have specialists than jacks of all trades. And so as your firm grows, I would like to say you've got competent bookkeepers, maybe overseen or managed by an accountant. I would say you've got tax preparers that are perhaps overseen by tax planning specialists or strategists. And then you, with your clients, could have CFO experts that then can come in with that service to your clientele. And so I'm very much of the opinion that if you can bring in those specialists, I will say that for the people that are the solopreneurs, they'll typically take 1 to 3 of these, at most 3 that they choose to specialize in: bookkeeping, accounting, tax preparation. That's it. That's all they do. And I think that's obtainable. It's realistic that you can have a relationship with your client at that level.
Yeah. And you can do it without building an enormous firm, right? And
Oh, yeah.
I think most of us, we're ambitious. We want to be successful, but there's a big difference between, half a dozen people and, working as a team to deliver great, bookkeeping and tax versus, a 60-person firm that's doing everything, right?
Amen. And I would add to this, and this is perhaps probably the most clarifying point of this. I think this is a telltale indicator of with whom we should be associating as accounting professionals. If I'm only doing bookkeeping services, it's obvious I want to go on a line with somebody that does tax preparation services. My books are going to be what they use to prepare the tax return. If I'm doing bookkeeping, I might work with a CPA or an accountant that's actually wanting to do the analysis of the books, but they don't want to actually prepare the books. Well, notice they're going to send clients my way. I'm going to send clients their way. If I'm working with somebody that's doing tax preparation, maybe I can do the tax planning for their clients, because they typically, planning institutions don't do the tax preparation and vice versa. So notice this is a collaboration that we can easily do within our profession, where we're all working together to better the client's needs. That's fascinating to me. And if we just would be more collaborative in our efforts, you could have one business client, a business owner, working with 2 or 3 entities, getting the 6 services they're in need of.
Katie said, SOPs are helpful for solo firms and those with team members. It creates consistency and saves time on the task processing. Where do you recommend storing those? In the project management system with the task, or in some other location? I have thoughts on that.
Please, yours, please.
Well, then I want to hear you, Roger. But
please,
to me, it's I think it's really important to. Well, actually, the best of both worlds is you create the documentation in, say, a wiki, and that could be. I mean, everybody's going to do it a little differently, but you could do a SharePoint, you could do Notion, you could do Google Docs, and you could link to those documents from the tasks. And that way, when you update the document, it's current for all the tasks it's linked to. It just depends on how your system works, right? If your system is such that every task has its own documentation that's individual, eventually you'll have multiple tasks for multiple clients, and it'll all be different, right? Because you have version control issues. So that's how I deal with it. Is create a single folder with all your documentation for all your standard processes, and then link from the tasks. But I'm curious to know what you think, Roger.
So I love your answer. I'm going to give you a different response just because of some of my experiences with clients. What I've done, and I've done this numerous times, is I've taken and the client is unclear as to what the process truly is, and they think they know what the steps are. What we've actually done is taken everything and done it in a paper format to literally see the physical motion of where things are falling. So they have like file organizers, and they'll move papers, and we're just trying to walk through the process and try and find the if then statements. If this, then that. Well, the point is once you figure out the steps, this is where it kind of breaks. Either people are strong in their ability to write bullet point tasks as sequences, or they're great at video and verbal explanations. And so some people will quickly gravitate to, here's the list. It's just a checklist of, here are the steps, and we're just going to follow the steps, and it doesn't matter who does it. It just goes down these steps, and when we're done, we're done. Others like to do the video and verbal explanations, and they'll use a tool like Loom to visually do the work, letting someone record what's going on. And then in training, somebody can reference back. How did they do that again? Where did they go? The thing that is a challenge with something like Loom is recording specifically the passwords and access points to get in. And that's where typically you need that documented in something that's like a task list. Log into this URL, here's the password. And what I'm trying to describe here is, if you go to those two levels, you can actually record that in your project management software as, here are the steps, and it's a PDF, let's say, of the steps, or it's a video of that process that people can refer back to as they're going through and doing the actual work itself. So most of the project management tools that I'm familiar with allow you to kind of capture that information for reference, and that's where you'd want to start storing this, because it's your operational procedures that you're using for your clients every week, every month, and so forth.
I guess the answer is, it's sort of a, if I might summarize, it's a bit of both, right? Some of it's going to live in your task management, project management system, such as Financial Sense, and some of it you'll want to live outside. Either way, though, whether it's in Loom or it's in a Google Doc, you want to then link to those tasks. And this is honestly, like, there is no answer. Everybody does it a little differently.
That's what I've learned.
On your preferences and your firm, but I would just make sure, like, design a system where you're not going to get stuck, right? Where your data gets siloed in a particular app, and then if that app changes or you change, you now have to somehow migrate all this data. So that's why I'm a big fan of putting it in, if you're on Microsoft, put it in like Microsoft Word Docs Online and link to them. Or if you're in Google, do the same with Google Docs and link to them, because people do migrate from Office or Google, but it's pretty rare that you're going to do that. So
I'm going to add to it. I loved how you pointed out that it's hard to say what to do, because so many of us have different tech stacks that we're leveraging. And so my point is I think you're just trying to, first of all, figure out what the process is. What are you trying to accomplish? And you're documenting that. And then you're going to say, and this is the tool we use to do it. And that's where you start getting specific as to the various software applications that might be utilized. And so if we can just be clear as to what we're trying to accomplish, it then becomes indifferent. It becomes agnostic as to the different tech stack we're moving from. And that's where I've experienced it so we're a post-secondary school for accounting professionals. And because we're a school, I need to go to the root. What are we trying to do, rather than the tool or the medium by which we're going to accomplish it?
And I would say, don't get bogged down in the details. I think too many folks, when they start creating these processes, they try to document every single little thing. And it's much more important to just get the broad overview out and then refine month after month, as opposed to trying to do it all at once, because you'll just never get it done. And by the way, Financial Sense, the sponsor of this series, is an excellent tool to get started documenting your tasks, your processes, creating those recurring checklists. Their GPT integration also helps you create email templates and save them and use them anytime. You can use AI to help respond to emails now.
Love it.
And so Roger, we're almost out of time here. I wanted to give you a chance to talk a little bit about universal accounting and your school. Like, what do you offer? Like, can I get a degree from universal accounting?
I love this. So we're a post-secondary school. What that means is we're not someone that you're going to go to for a 4-year, 2-year, 6-year degree. What we are is post that. So most of the people that I work with are CPAs, EAs, accountants with 10, 15, 20 years of experience. What we do is we actually offer training to them as business owners as they're starting or building their business or training their staff. And so we have various things such as courses related to bookkeeping, tax preparation, QuickBooks training, but we've also now moved into offering training related to CFO services, how to market, price it, sell it, fulfill it. And so that's where we're trying to really, as a school, help accounting professionals really hone their skills, especially in the small business market. So we do offer certifications, not degrees. So you can become certified as a professional bookkeeper, which is proficient in the day-to-day applications of accounting and small business. You can become a professional tax preparer, which is to say you're proficient in both individual and business returns. You can become a profit and growth expert, which is to speak to your ability to work with your clients in a CFO and advisory space, how to market, sell, price, and fulfill those services. And so as a post-secondary school, we're helping individuals really kind of go deeper into the accounting profession, especially from the point of view of small business accounting.
There's a poll on the screen for those of you who would like to learn more about Financial Sense. Just hit yes, please, and then make sure to hit submit, and they'll follow up with more info. Roger, sounds like I'm going to need to check out Universal Accounting to see. I love certifications, so I got to collect them all. So now that I know of yours, I'm going to go take a look.
I love it. It's going to be Blake Oliver, CPA.pb.ptp. You keep going. That's awesome.
That's right. We have to max out the LinkedIn characters, right, in your name. That's what I see people doing there. What do you do when you run out? I guess that's when you have to stop, or you have to
No, we go to
prioritize.
LinkedIn and ask for more characters.
Exactly. Really, they should support us in this. We had one last question I just want to fit in before we go. Lynn asked, I have a client who's a parent company and has subsidiaries in Asia. Can AI solve a checklist that aggregates tasks and tax deadlines of Asian countries? Actually, I mean, I'm not going to say it'll do it right, but if you do that, if you go to ChatGPT and ask it to do that for you, it will try and maybe help you with 80% of it.
Yep.
But you just got to understand that if it doesn't know the answer, it makes one up. It's an autocomplete type of statistical model. So just don't be like that lawyer who was in the New York Times this week for using ChatGPT to write a 10-page brief that he submitted to the court that was filled with half a dozen fake cases. Yes, that really happened. And now he is in
two
very big
things.
trouble.
One, it will do about 80-90% of the heavy lifting. It'll do a lot of the work, but you're right.
Yeah.
Then you can come in and just fill in the gaps. Second thing I'd say is what you're describing there is hallucinations. It's because ChatGPT is needing to answer the question, and therefore it'll make up things. And so that's where we as humans need to come in and kind of second guess things. And that's where our expertise is really critical.
Roger, thanks so much for your time. We're going to go ahead and close out the webinar now. Anyone who has any more questions, if you want to type those in, I will stick around and the Financial Sense team will stick around to answer those for you. Roger, great chatting with you. Hope to see you soon.
It was a pleasure. Hey, if it's about accounting, it's universal.
I love it.